Assalamu alaikum. News and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman, live from Islamabad. Uh, Today, a very important subject indeed that is related to the current Afghan situation. As we all know, that recently there was a lot of stories emerging from Afghanistan, especially from Kabul, that the overall situation is getting really adverse, especially the approaching winter has caused a lot of problem. It was also believed that around 60% of the Afghan population perhaps could starve in the coming weeks or months ahead. And at the same time, since the Afghan Taliban regime has not been recognized by any country so far, the sanctions are still there, their funds are still frozen. IMF or institutions like the World Bank, they haven't been able to support them the way they should have. Plus, a lot of other countries, for example, the OIC, they have also arranged a meeting of the 57 Islamic countries in order to come up with some sort of a viable solution. Pakistan, at the same time, also announced that perhaps they can also have another meeting of the OIC in Islamabad on the 17th of December, just to make sure that situation should ease for the Afghan public. Now, as we all know, that whatever was expected is not happening so far. Countries like Pakistan, perhaps Russia, China, Iran, they are trying their level best to ease out things. But still, obviously, as long as the Western Bloc, they are not supporting, things will remain very, very fragile, will remain very fluid in Afghanistan. But interestingly, now one important factor that we would like to talk about is the ongoing effort and the recent meeting of the Taliban with the Westerners. Now, that can pave way forward for some sort of a relaxation for the current regime. But perhaps if it doesn't work out, then there has to be another solution for that. Now, to quickly talk about the current situation, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Brigadier Tipu Sultan Saab, a known analyst. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and for your presence in the show. And we also have with us Manzoor Afridi Saab, who is also a senior analyst and an expert on international relations. Afridi Saab, pleasure to have you in the show as well, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And we also have with us Mr. Adil Sultan Saab, who is an expert on international relations and IR in particular. Thank you so much for your presence as well, Mr. Sultan. Now, let me quickly start off from you, Brigadier Tipu. We have done so many programs on this current issue, on perhaps so many other related regional problems also. But so the way we all analyzed about Afghanistan, we thought that the issues would be sorted out. The moment the takeover of the Kabul was witnessed on the 15th of August this year, it's been just 3 months, perhaps, or 4 months, but situation is getting from bad to worse, since the Western Bloc is not supporting so far. So what's your take, sir? How do you, in fact, see the current happenings, and what should be the way forward now?
Well, Faisal, I will tell you that since August, Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, a strategic surprise that the Americans had in South Asia. Ever since that, although there were tremendous difficulties that the Taliban faced in running the Afghan government in that country, which was torn by war over decades. They had a trouble in Panjshir Valley, they had trouble elsewhere, but I think they have done reasonably well within themselves and their resources, despite the opposition from ISK and other groups and Uzbeks and Tajiks up in the north. And there are other factors like Indians who are trying to destabilize Afghanistan through their known contacts over there. The Taliban have done well. The Doha talks, which have taken place, concluded over the last 2 days, they were held in a good atmosphere. The old demand of the West that it should be an inclusive government in Kabul, and the girls should go to the school, and the Afghan territory should not be used by other powers, etc. And the Taliban telling the Americans that they're facing difficulties in Afghanistan because of their frozen assets and their difficulties giving pay to the people, medical care, economy is not running well, and they need the support of the international community. On one hand, the Americans are saying that they are not, the Afghan people will not be infringed upon because of their sanctions. On the other hand, they are not releasing their funds which have they seized over there. I think within the Taliban ranks, they are worried about the opposition forces like ISIS, ISK, or the old Northern Alliance and the influence that they hold, like Ahmad Massoud and all. If they join together, it will be a reasonable opposition to the Afghan government in Kabul right now. I think there are other factors also that the West is worried about the China factor, about the Russians who want to re-establish their links with Afghanistan, and there have been a flurry of meetings that Taliban have undertaken in Moscow and with China and other Arab countries and Pakistan too. I think the international community slowly and gradually realizes that they have to come together to save this country from the trouble that was there. Ironically, the Americans are talking about the schools and the girls while they themselves have been bombing the marriage parties and schools and all that, and during that 2 decades of war, the Afghan people have suffered tremendously. And over here, they want to tell the Taliban that they are worried about the Afghan people and all. If they are worried, they should release their funds. If the West is worried, they should rally a support for the Taliban. Although the Doha talks were in good atmosphere, yet nothing concrete yet has come out of it, and Pakistan has a role to play in it. It has played a very good role in helping the Taliban financially also, for medicine also, food supplies also. We're keeping our lines open. We are still handling the Afghan refugees. But I think our embassy is working in Kabul, so is the UAE, and Saudis are working over there. The Chinese are in contact, the Russians are inclined to open up their mission in Kabul. I think what I feel is that slowly and gradually the world is going to realize that they need they need to help the Taliban government. Whatever the West is saying, you see, the first Taliban government in 90s, they did not export terrorism to the other countries. They did not affect other countries like that. And what would they do that? Over the past about few months that they have ruled Afghanistan, there is no evidence that they have nurtured the terrorist groups over there, except that Pakistan would want them to rein in the TTP, which they are finding difficult in their border areas across the Durrani line and all that. I think they fear.
I would also like to, in fact, now bring in Manzoor Afridi Saab, and I would like to put this question to him. Manzoor Saab, the other day, I was in fact invited on an Indian channel, and one of the questions that was put to me was that India is ready to provide the basic facilities to the Afghan people, perhaps in the form of some food items or medicine in particular. And they said that why don't Pakistan let us use the route from Vaga to Kabul and let us help. So the government, in fact, they were saying that the Pakistani government is not letting us do that, and this could have been great help. So let's throw light on that aspect that if Pakistan is ready to host the conference of around 57 Islamic states and come up with some sort of a viable solution. Do you think this can be done or this cannot be done? If cannot be done, why so?
Well, Faisal Saab, if we see the situation in Afghanistan, and especially for the last 20 years since the launching of the war on terror, so the Indian influence was growing day by day, and now with the coming into power of Taliban in Afghanistan, so obviously that now India is, we can say, out from Afghanistan. So about the food item or about the help what India wants to do with Afghanistan. No doubt that on a humanitarian basis, it is the right of the Afghan people that they should be helped. But what concerns Pakistan had showed in the last 20 years repeatedly with the Afghan governments and also with the US presidents, with Junior Bush or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. So Pakistan was not heard there in Afghanistan, and all the concerns of Pakistan were still there, and those were persistent about the growing Indian influence in Afghanistan. And what India had done in the last 20 years, that India was trying to have a triangular relationship and a regional triangle in the shape of India, Afghanistan and Iran. So if India really wants to help Afghanistan, even it's possible through the Indian Ocean, through the Iranian way, no doubt. But of course, there are many problems even in South Asia. That is the poverty or water crisis, or even not having too much people-to-people contact, or even the SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. That regional organization, a representative of an organization of South Asia, that is not functional, and that is also because of Indian hegemony. So if India really wants to have prosperity in this region, including Afghanistan, so first India also have to look into these issues. But I would say that I think if humanitarian need is there in Afghanistan, which is sure, and if any country want to have stability over there, then of course Pakistan can provide such kind of transit or such kind of route to India. So, but first also to look into these things, what I mentioned before, that India should really consider it if want to have more inter-regional trade in South Asia, which is now about 5 to 6%, and that is the one of the lowest, even lower than the Africa. And in this age of regional integration, I think it is very much disappointing for all the states of South Asia. And now even Pakistan and India, they are the permanent members of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. For all these purposes, no doubt that the roots or the regional integration that has now more significance, and it is also very much important, especially in case of South Asia, and more importantly in the case of Afghanistan, which is a landlocked country. So all India, what has done in the last 20 years, or what we want to have a brighter future for South Asia or for Afghanistan. Let's to talk and let's to move forward for all the feasible solution of all the outstanding issues, even including the Jammu and Kashmir issue.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But now coming to you, Mr. Adil Sultan Saab, the Doha meeting, let's talk about that. The Afghan Taliban, in fact, again demanded that the Americans should, unfreeze their assets worth around 9.5 billion in cash, and other humanitarian aid should also start pouring in for the people of Afghanistan. But the actual demand of the Americans was to make sure that the Taliban should ensure enough that there should be no attack on supporting countries, I would say, of the Americans, and perhaps the Americans themselves coming out, emitting from Afghan soil. I mean, on one end, the Americans, they always, you put on CNN or you put on BBC, you would end up talking about women's rights. You would end up talking about similar Western originated issues, I would say, that they want to be taken care of in Afghanistan by the current regime. But when it comes to people who are dying of hunger, they do not have any medical facilities, they do not have any other source to look after their affairs and to make sure that day-to-day issues are sorted out. Don't you think this is clearly a double standard? And actually, the Americans were never there to reconstruct or rebuild or ease out the problems of the Afghan public. They were perhaps there for their own personal objective and their personal agenda in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. Their exit also, in fact, throws a lot of light on that particular aspect. Your take, Sultan Sahab.
Absolutely. There's no two thoughts on this, that these are double standards, but this is what the international norms are. This is how great powers they play. But unfortunately, what is happening in Afghanistan is that United States and the Western powers, they are punishing Afghanistan for their own follies. They made blunders in Afghanistan. They tried to reconstruct, bring democracy, the Western values, and they failed miserably in Afghanistan. So unfortunately, now they are using these talks, other excuses, like you said, they're talking about assurances. How many times the Afghan Taliban has to give these assurances that their territory will not be willingly used against the other countries? Now, willingly, why I say, this country has been under war, in a state of war for the last 5 decades. There are no institutions working. Even before the Taliban took over, the previous regime, the government, they were ineffective. Effectively, the Western power or the US, they were trying to control Afghanistan through their puppet government, and they couldn't do that. So what kind of assurances do they expect from Taliban? They have just come in August and a couple of months. And the other day, the delegation once that was in Pakistan, Islamabad, and I heard their foreign minister, he was frustrated that everybody is talking about that, give us assurances. So what other assurances that they want? This was part of the Doha Agreement of February 2020, and they have been repeatedly giving these assurances to anybody who has tried to connect with the Taliban. So I think Taliban are doing their bit. It's the others who are not doing their bit. And unfortunately, they are playing politics with this. An interesting outcome from the Doha dialogue, if you see, one aspect that the US didn't raise during this recent dialogue was the demand for an inclusive government. I don't know whether it was unwittingly missed out or they are trying to back off from this demand, because they also know how inclusive government there can be in Afghanistan once there is no opposition, there are no other groups. So that's a dilemma, because the West, the other countries, they also know the limitations in Afghanistan in the absence of any institutions. But they continue to put up these demands to Taliban. So that's very unfortunate.
Now, another development, I mean, Pakistan has really hailed that the Afghan Taliban and the US meeting is a great progress, or perhaps it's a great step forward in the right direction. So our Foreign Office really expects that things should ease out, and the current tension that is developing should also, I mean, go down. Do you think the approach of Pakistan, indirectly or directly, perhaps can really pave way forward for the right decision-making process? Because if you look at Pakistan themselves, I mean, we are going through a lot of pressure as well from the Western front, and in particular from the United States of America, whether in the form of FATF or IMF or otherwise. So are we in a position now to take a stance and to sort of, come up as a regional power to ensure about the stability in the region, in particular in Afghanistan, and about the people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Pakistan is doing more than its capacity because it's an existential threat for Pakistan. People may not realize what is happening in Afghanistan. The way it is unfolding, it is going to be a great humanitarian crisis, and Pakistan will have to bear the consequences. So whatever Pakistan is doing, because of the compassion, because of we feel the Afghans are our brothers, the neighborly country, Muslim country, we are doing it, but we are also doing it for our own interest. They recently formed this council under National Security Advisor. I think that's a kind of a framework that has been established, Inter-Ministerial Coordination Council, the way we handle pandemic and COC. So one can say this one Inter-Ministerial Coordination Cell that has been established under National Security Advisor and the Special Representative for Afghanistan, that's one way that Pakistan has demonstrated that it's really sincere in addressing Afghanistan's problem and lessening the burden of the Afghan people by helping them, by reducing that bureaucratic processes, at least from Pakistan. So anybody who wants to join Pakistan, Pakistan has made it very clear that we are in real sense providing a platform where others can also join us and cut this red tapeism and help the Afghans who are in desperate need of help during this winter. Like you said in the start, it's going to be, Afghanistan was already destroyed. So this winters and this there's no aid coming from the outside. The Western powers have blocked their assets. So how do the world think that they can let Afghan survive? How Afghan people would survive in that condition of sanctions and continuous threat posed by the weather, also posed by the other insurgents also, because Afghanistan is not stable as yet. So there are multiple problems that Afghan Taliban, because they are at the helm of affairs, they have to deal with those issues. But we also need to understand they do not have that kind of experience in governance. They will take time. It is expecting them that within a couple of months they would be able to address and take care of all these crises. I think it is asking too much. And Pakistan, for its part, I think it's playing a very, very constructive role and demonstrating the world also by taking that leadership role, that this is how, even with limited resources, we are using our institutions also, our whatever is available for us, for our own people, we are offering to the Afghan people. I think that's where Pakistan, I think, is doing more than its capacity to help the Afghan brothers.
All right, now coming back to you, Brigadier Tipu, another very important fact. There were 31, exactly 31 donors to the World Bank administered Afghan Reconstruction Trust Fund, that was called ARTF. They said they must approve and transfer before the funds could flow to the World Food Program and UNICEF. Not talking about the role of the United Nations, the World Food Program is one, UNICEF. There are areas which, are very important in Afghanistan where the United Nations and its bodies can actually work. Just take it on war footing. Just think there is an earthquake and one has to release help. This is the kind of situation which could develop in the coming days if the right amount of support is not provided at the right time. Now, how do you see that aspect, sir? Again, do you believe that the American pressure would be there even on the OIC countries like Saudi Arabia or UAE perhaps? And these two countries were the countries which accepted the Taliban regime in the late 1990s when they took charge after a long civil war.
Absolutely, Faisal, you're right about these using influence on the international donor agencies, the Monetary Fund, the international banks.
But you go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay. That pressure on the international institutions, that is deterring many states not to come forward. But today, I think there was a positive news by Reuters. I think World Bank, they have given a green signal that $280 million that can be unfrozen and provided to the Afghan people through World Food Program and UNICEF. I think that's one positive thing that has come out today.
Brigadier Tipu, your take, sir.
Well, we can talk over and over again. We all know what is happening in Afghanistan and what are their troubles. The point is that those forces who have lost their game in South Asia, the Western Alliance led by the Americans, now they are trying to get into it again. They're watching Chinese over their shoulder, and the new alliance may not emerge over here. They'll be ousted from this region. Their strategy has failed and all that. The fact of the matter is that the Pakistan, despite having a straightforward solution of trying to really recognize the government in Kabul of Taliban and bringing in Chinese in a big way and urging the Russians, and also despite our troubles that we've had over two decades of war at the hands of the Western Alliance and the Americans, and the terrorism that was fanned across Pakistan by the Indians, and the Americans knew it and they tacitly watched it. They had their approval the CIA was functional, coaxed with RAW and all that, and the NSD led by Alhamdulillah Mohib and company and everybody. Despite those troubles and those scars of history that we have had from these powers from Afghanistan, we are still considering what the West is thinking about Afghanistan, and we are urging them to help Afghanistan and to limit their animosity in the region, and to be really have a humanitarian sort of an approach instead of dictating what the Taliban should do in Afghanistan. Taliban have not known to have committed any international crime as compared to the West, what they have done to the Middle East, to North Africa, to South Asia and all that. So they are trying to wash their own sins of their bombing innocent people across the world and South Asia. I think the West needs to have a soul searching at the moment, and we have to move away from this politics, and we have to move away from this power game and help those hunger-stricken people out in the cold and having a lot of trouble with their sick people who come across Pakistan for their treatment. Even now, the Afghan refugees that were here, they're affluent, I know for a fact that they're helping their brethren, and Pakistan is helping them. On the Indian sinister move to have an approach from Wagah to Kabul through Rawalpindi, Islamabad region, GT Road and all that, you have to know that they're known to have, their analysts have known to have urged the Indian government to establish their old links that the RAW had in there with the Northern Alliance and across the provinces of Afghanistan, and Pakistan will be well aware of that. And any spoiler anymore are not tolerated by us, neither by the Afghans.
I mean, they can still do that. I mean, via Iran, they can send the aid to the Afghan public. Can't they do that?
Say that again, please.
I'm saying that the Indians can always use the Iranian side, sir, and if they want to support. I mean, let's suppose Pakistan does not allow them for whatever concerns they have. And I totally agree with you, there are very legitimate concerns.
Present themselves as a good human being, as a humanitarian worker. Otherwise, Hindus have always had a bagal mein churi and muh mein ram ram, and they are practicing that since the ages. But I think we have to realize now that the world has to realize now. Imran Khan has said so many times that the world has to move away from power politics and see what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening to the human beings. And they have killed millions upon millions of people in Afghanistan, and they have not raised any infrastructure. They did not build anything. The Japanese were nuked by the Americans, and yet Douglas MacArthur came in and he rebuilt everything, established a link between the human beings, and he launched a massive reconstruction project across Japan. And when he was forced to leave by the US government because of his popularity, the entire Japanese nation was weeping. They have forgotten all that Pacific War and all those bombings and all that, because MacArthur realized that, and he established a link with them, and he helped the Japanese people. Over here, have the Americans, have the North Africans in Libya, have they helped somebody in Syria? Have they helped somebody in Iraq? Have they helped somebody in Afghanistan, really?
Different agenda. Their footsteps in the region, I mean, they meant, it had a very different kind of an approach. And interestingly, they were there for the last 20 years. And now, after spending $2.2 trillion, almost 2,500 of their own soldiers, American soldiers I'm talking about, were killed. Thousands of them were wounded. And yet, at the end of the day, the regime of the Taliban was replaced by the regime of the Taliban. Now, this is what they have achieved over a period of time. There's one comment before I move on to the other guest, and that is about another story that is about the Afghan-Iran border. As we all know that these two countries share a border that is around 900 kilometers long. According to one source which I followed, and I in fact did a little research, it said that 11 of the Iranian soldiers were killed. Whereas the Taliban are concerned, this is what they claim. And on the other side, from the Iranian, they said, well, 3 of the Afghan Taliban were killed, or the word they use is Talibs. So interestingly, sir, and then the story came out that there was this misunderstanding. Let's throw light on that aspect, sir. This is the first time that we have actually heard that certain which took place on the border areas, not from inside Afghanistan, sir.
No, there is a history about Herat, and there is a history about the Afghan and the Iranian borders, and the Hazara tribe, and the ethnicity that plays in, and the governor Sultan that was there and was transported back to Iran. That the Iranians do want to ingress into Afghanistan legally or illegally, and established their links with the opposing forces to Taliban. There is a known fact, but that's a tactical error, or that's a tactical happening, not a strategic happening. It has an impact, but it does not have that the amount of money that the Americans poured into Afghanistan and then ate it back. Their mercenaries, their private companies, their contractors, and all that. That money was siphoned back through Amrullah Saleh. That money was siphoned back through Alhamdulillah Muhib and Ahmad Masood and Karzai and Ashraf Ghani and everybody, and Abdullah. What is the answer to that? Today, you know what the West has done, and they've announced a $340 billion connectivity project themselves. It was in the dawn today. That was to counter the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and that is to counter the CPAC and all that. So the actual thing is that it is not what it looks like as the Americans are the forebearers and the torch of democracy and humanitarian feeling, and the West has that sort of a aura of democracy and human rights, and they did Tiananmen Square and all that. They can't see what is happening in Kashmir. They didn't see what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. They did not see what happens in North Africa and elsewhere. So it is not that. The actual thing is that it is a power game.
Simple. Now moving on to you, Manzoor Afridi Saab. One important point, and that is at the end of the day about the people, about the women, about the children, about the overall population, the elderly in particular. Sir, I was interviewing General Lodi the other day, and in fact he revealed something very interesting. He said this is perhaps, okay, well, I do understand that there are issues, but sometimes certain news are broken out of proportion. And the reality is very different. The position in Afghanistan is not as bad as shown by the Western world, in particular. He used the word BBC or CNN and the Western major media channels. Now, on one end, we are literally thinking that half of the population, or perhaps 60%, is going to die because of the weather and the food shortage and otherwise. But at the same time, he said that since Pakistan is there, we are attached and we have a proper border communication. Starvation is not going to take place in Afghanistan. We'll look after the affairs. So I was just thinking that what if these OIC countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, in fact, give some relief, or let's say says that from 6 months to 8 months or 1 year, perhaps we could give you free oil facility or deferred payment, let's say. Or similarly, certain countries from the northern side can help them, have a good food stock. Few countries could help them, and I'm not talking about only the Muslim countries. Countries like Cuba can look after their health issues, and so on and so forth. Don't you think that let's minus the Western support, let's cut off the Western, kind of the approach they have, the non-Western allies or countries, don't you think they are in a condition and they are in a position to support the Afghan problem and at least address the real issues out there?
Well, the Muslim countries under the umbrella of OIC are the non-Western countries, mostly the Asian countries, and particularly China and Russia and Central Asian republics, or maybe Turkey and no doubt Pakistan. All these countries, they are now having the wait and see policy for Afghanistan. I mean that they want to go and they want to hear something from international community. And I do agree with General Lodi that have you conveyed that the situation in Afghanistan is not as worse as the Western media, BBC, CNN, or other media outlets they are portraying. Of course, there are issues. There is poverty. They need humanitarian help, but the starvation or the famine, such kind of things, and severe winter, it can take place. I think if these countries, the regional countries or the neighboring countries of Afghanistan or some major Islamic countries under OIC, if they move forward, so such things can be avoided. And as far as the question is concerned about that whether these countries are capable to have such initiatives, yes, why not? They have the capability. They can take this responsibility. And now even the Afghan Taliban, I mean the Afghan government has also endorsed the regional mechanism for all the solutions of Afghanistan. And now the current Afghan government is also have a good contact in relationship with Beijing, with Moscow, and all with the Central Asian republics, and here no doubt with Pakistan. These countries can help, and if OIC if it come forward for humanitarian help, no doubt that Afghanistan can come out from all these problems, especially the now what the Western media is portraying, that there is a humanitarian crisis. And indeed, the current Afghan government that is in need of such fund, indeed that it is their right to.
Those journalists who have traveled extensively to that particular part of the world, and you understand what exactly is going on according to your own information that you have gathered through your own sources, through friends and through other journalists. Is the situation really bad, or it's been, just exposed the way, we perceive?
I think situation, of course there are issues, but situation is not as worse as the Western media is portraying, or is going to convey its message to the international community or to the world. So the Muslim countries under the umbrella of OIC, or the northern countries, I mean Central Asian republics, Russian Federation, or People's Republic of China, they will definitely at the end of the day they will come forward to save Afghanistan from this crisis, and definitely that they will move to have stability in Afghanistan. So then it can be another, we can say, a humanitarian failure for the Western community, and also if United Nations, if it doesn't fulfill its commitment for these humanitarian aids.
All right. Now, last question to you, Adil Sultan Saab, before I wrap up the show. One thing is for sure, and that is that without the support, and as we say, without the Arshirwad of the Americans, nothing can happen. And especially when you talk about OIC, I respect the leaders, I respect the forum of OIC. But sir, OIC has been a failure over the last so many years. Whether you talk about the Palestinian issue or you talk about the Kashmir issue, I mean, we only hear silence, and that's it. Now, do you think without the wish and will of the Americans, in particular, countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE, who are the most influential and one of those who recognized the Taliban regime then, have not recognized it so far? No one has. You think that without the support of the Americans and without the influence of the Americans, they can't take any decision? Do you think we should expect whatever Manzoor Afridi Saab is saying, that, OIC is going to be doing something pretty effective to support the Afghan people? Or do you think it is going to be a useless body as always?
Absolutely. I think unfortunately that is going to be the case. OIC has not played a very constructive role in Afghanistan, and it's unlikely to. But at the same time, I think if the countries want to help, there are ways and means. Like Pakistan, I said, we have decided this one interministerial coordination cell that has been established in 22nd November meeting. Pakistan announced that it will be providing 5 billion rupees to the Afghanis, and it will also facilitate the 50,000 metric tons from if India wants to ship it or transport it through Pakistan. Unfortunately, India is again playing politics on a very menial issue, that they want their trucks to take this wheat to Afghanistan so they can show those banners that they are helping Afghan. Although if they wanted to, the way they had been supplying arms and ammunition through aerial corridors, they could have provided that, but they are playing politics. Now coming back to OIC, I think yes, you are right. Most of the countries are concerned because the banks that they are not operating, and I would beg to disagree with on the situation in Afghanistan. I think Afghanistan situation is really bad. Why I say this thing? For 20 years it was in war, systems were not working, and now since Taliban take over, their assets have been frozen. So all the banks, they are closed in Afghanistan. So just imagine the kind of scenario where there is no financial aid coming from outside. The countries are reluctant because they are worried that US laws will be imposed on them and there would be sanctions on their countries or their banks, so they are reluctant. Like you said, they are waiting for the US nod. Today there was news that they are giving some conditional waivers, the US authorities, but again, people are more concerned about their own self-interest, their national interest. They are less concerned about this humanitarian crisis. But countries like Pakistan, for us, it is going to be an existential crisis if Afghanistan's situation deteriorates. And that's why this AICC, the coordination cell under the National Security Advisor and Special Representative, they are the co-chairs. I think these are bold decisions that Pakistan has taken, that despite all odds, despite these concerns, we are going out on a limb and helping Afghan brothers. So if the countries, they want to really help, there are ways and means. Nobody stops them from providing humanitarian assistance. But like you said, they are just waiting for the nod from the United States, because United States is playing politics with it. And like in Doha dialogue also, the Taliban, they said, separate politics from humanitarian issues. Don't play politics with humanitarian issues. So that's the major issue. And unfortunately, this is going to remain there as long as United States get some concessions, or it projects something that it has got a big concession from Afghan Taliban. Probably they may give some nod to these OIC countries, the rich countries, to provide some aid, but that's very unfortunate for the Afghan people.
All right. Well, since I'm totally running out of time, I would like to say thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presence. Brigadier Tipu Sultan Saab, it was a pleasure having you. Manzoor Afridi Saab, thank you so much for your time. And Adil Sultan Saab, it was indeed a pleasure to have you in the show. And that's all we have for this week. Inshallah, I'll see you again on Monday at 8:05 p.m. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Have a great weekend and stay home and stay safe. Khuda Hafiz.